Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players, uncover their stories, and discover what makes them tick. If you love guitar, music, and the backstory of people's lives, stick around. You're in the right place. The Be Fulfilled Journal helps you be more honest with yourself and with others and be more open to handling things you've avoided dealing with for years. It's a 12-week online and journal program that helps you identify and eliminate things you do that are causing you stress and live in more gratitude and joy. It was actually developed by a long-term friend of mine who got sober in 2008, and he's put together a great deal just for my listeners. You get the 300-page hardcover journal and access to the 12-week video program online, plus free shipping, plus membership in a private Facebook support group with others going through the program, plus a 5-day mini course showing you how to let go of stuff that's draining your energy, plus a 30-day 100% money-back guarantee. To start your journey and get all the bonuses, go to BeFulfilledJournal.com/ELG. That's BeFulfilledJournal.com/ELG. For information about advertising on Everyone Loves Guitar, including information on geographically targeted ads, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. And I've got the one and only Nels Cline with us today. Really good to have him. And this is the truth. I was on an interview before this, and someone says, man, you know what one of my favorite bands is? I said, what? He goes, Wilco. I says, this happens all the time, though, man. The universe is like involved in this show because this happens too much for this to be coincidence. And I told him, you're coming on next. So
good to be here, Craig. It's nice to be here. I'm glad people like Wilco.
Oh, man. And everybody loves your playing. Let me just give a quick shout out and a thank you to Ben Monder for hooking us up. So that was cool.
Nice.
In case you don't know Nels, obviously he's best known these days as the lead guitarist from Wilco. His career and his performances span like loads of genres: jazz, rock, punk, experimental, with over 200 recordings, at least 30 as a band leader. Rolling Stone named Nels one of 20 new guitar gods. You look like a new guitar god, Nels. And one of the top 100 guitarists of all time. Beyond Wilco, Nels performs in a duo project with guitarist Julian Lage, or Lage. I always mess his name up. I don't know how to, what is it?
Oh, Lage.
Lage, yeah. Okay. And a quartet, the Nels Cline 4. He also collaborates with his partner. Can I say, is it partner or wife? What is the?
Well, she's my wife and she's my partner. Yuka Honda.
Yuka Honda as the duo Cup. And they have a new record coming out soon. He also performs as Stretch Woven with percussionist Scott Amendola, and he leads the Nels Cline Singers. He also plays with Stained Radiance, which is an improvisational live project with performance painter Norton Wisdom. And he periodically presents concepts of his concept album called Lovers, which involves a 17-person ensemble, and collaborates with dozens of composers and improvisers in this. Man, thank you again, Nels.
Wow, yeah. I'm tired.
I know. It's just pretty impressive, right? I think the new guitar god thing, you're not really dressed like a new guitar god, Nels. I mean, if you're God, you got to
I need some robes.
Yeah,
I need a cape.
At least a like a smoking jacket with an ascot or something like that and a pipe. Man, you've been with Wilco since 2004. This is going to be the only question that I will ask you that you've heard probably a couple of times. How'd you first connect with Jeff Tweedy and the rest of the band?
Well, I was in a band called the Geraldine Fibbers on tour, really at that point as a substitute guitarist for their regular guitarist, Daniel Keenan, who was ailing. And I was a huge fan of the Geraldine Fibbers. I had been exposed to their music by Mike Watt while we were on tour in '95 together. Carla Bozilic, the leader of the band, was a friend of Watt's. He had known her since she was 13, I believe, and had produced the first recording she ever sang on a band she was in called Invisible Chains that came out on New Alliance, the Minutemen's label. And, well, we ended up opening for Golden Smog at one point during that. I guess it was about 10 months. I was on tour on and off with them in 1996. And Golden Smog, of course, includes Jeff Tweedy. I guess they don't really play anymore, Golden Smog, so I could say included Jeff Tweedy, and along with members of the Jayhawks and Run Westy Run and the Honey Dogs and Soul Asylum. And the Geraldine Fibbers really liked Jeff Tweedy. They really liked his songs. They really cottoned to him. And I was really kind of not paying attention, to be honest. I was much more sort of captivated by their excellent taste in cover songs. And the tour was a blast. And I think the last night of the tour was maybe what cemented an inevitable sort of relationship between Jeff and me, because I sat in on the Beach by Neil Young. Great and he remembered whatever I played fondly, apparently. So flash forward a few years, and Carla and Jeff sort of stayed in touch over the years, and Carla got asked to open for Wilco after the Fibbers broke up, and Carla and I had become a couple at this point, and had been for a few years, and I was playing in her band, and so we opened for Wilco in 2003 on some dates in the Midwest, and that's when I met everybody and in the band, and they, I'd met some of them at gigs in Chicago, but I'd never seen them all in one place. and they heard me playing lap steel and whatever with Carla, and I think that's what maybe inspired Jeff and whoever else in the band suggested me to see if I wanted to play with Wilco.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that, man. I know you've told that story before, but I don't know how many of my listeners have heard it. I know I hate asking questions that everybody asks, so I'm sorry, man. I saw an interview you gave online, and you said, "Sound is where I like to live." And I thought that your playing certainly reflects this in spades. And I was curious where that fascination came from, and what were the most important parts of that learning curve from a practical application standpoint, because I've got like thousands and thousands of guitar players listening to this and would probably like to take the same journey, which I would imagine was like not just, going to Guitar Center, getting a couple of pedals and, practicing on the weekend,
most of this is accidental, to be honest, as far as application. I mean, I didn't have any desire to mimic the sounds that inspired me when I was becoming absorbed in the realm of what was at that time rock and roll, which was the late 60s. But that was a very exciting time for recorded music. And I was very affected, as was my twin brother, Alex, by not just some of the classic, great normal sounding music of the day, which would be, great blues records, great pop records, great soul records, folk records, but especially by what we may generally at this point term psychedelic music. And so the advent of certain recording techniques and certain exploration in sound tantalized and excited both my brother and me, and led us on a voyage of discovery that went pretty far outside mere rock and roll, I guess you could say, very early on. So my initial fascination, besides the sounds of Jimi Hendrix and the Yardbirds and many other people I could mention, also included Ravi Shankar and a great interest from a very early age, I guess, in Indian classical music, so-called. We became, Alex and I became interested in Balinese music, in gamelan, in the music of Harry Partch, which we didn't know was microtonal music. We just thought it was music written for homemade instruments that sounded cool. So really that, along with, exploration of Edgar Varese or, electronic music of the time, and orchestral music, led me to, I guess, a kind of idea about harmony and rhythm and sound in a more general sense. And there was nothing scholastic about, I didn't have my scholastic spelunker's helmet on, ferreting out every kind of tidbit of coherent knowledge and theory or whatever. Everything was just sort of a process of trial and error and just, I don't know what, just I like playing. So I just kept playing, and I'm drawn to the things that I'm drawn to. And so it's very personal in a way, which sounds are the most enchanting and why. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's very personal on a certain level. But of course, when people respond to it, as they sometimes do, when I play one of my pieces or when I do something with the guitar, then I think, okay, well, other people like some of the same sounds I do. I don't know. So it's really about imagination to me. It's not about technique, and it's not about effects pedals. It's just about what one can imagine and how that feels. And so that's kind of been the area that I've pursued, in spite of the fact that I've also sort of, I guess, haphazardly pursued a slightly more well-trodden path of harmony and rhythm and melody and all that stuff. I think that this statement that you keyed in on is, it comes from my experiences having certain music and certain sounds affect me very deeply and make me feel sort of like I'm leaving my body or something, like make me feel tingly all over, or make me feel like I'm going to transcend or something. And that's sort of what I'm chasing when I do certain things aesthetically, some of which I think some people may find quite abhorrent, but for me are kind of, I don't know, they just sort of make me feel like I'm not there. And I like that feeling. I like the feeling of disappearing and being super present. And that could be, the opening passage of, the Mother Goose Suite by Ravel, or it could be, the middle of a Sonic Youth song when Lee Ronaldo and Thurston Moore go nuts or something. You know what I mean? It's just, it's this feeling that I have that's highly subjective that feeds my imagination and inspires me in ways that are quite multifaceted, and I guess I'm not really doing a good job at expressing them, but I find that that's really what drives me more than anything.
So you're turned on more by sound per se than tone.
Well, tone can be part of sound, certainly, sure. But I mean, if you're talking about guitar tone, I was never somebody who even knew what good guitar tone was. I mean, I listened to other people have it, but I didn't know I could ever have it. You know what I mean? I was listening to Jimi Hendrix, but never tried to play like him. It wasn't until I was in my 30s probably that I ever even attempted to play a riff that sounded like Jimi Hendrix. I just realized it was just in there and I could do it, but it seemed sacrilegious to me when I was younger. I just thought that I was going to take a more modest path, and that maybe if I was lucky, I'd end up sounding closer to Duane Allman or like Peter Banks, the guitarist with Yes before Steve Howe, or Steve Howe, who seemed kind of superhuman to me though. And guys like, I loved Peter Frampton when he was playing with Humble Pie, for example. And I mentioned that so many times in interviews, and everyone leaves it out because they think that I must be kidding because I mentioned Peter Frampton. But it really was
great player.
His playing with Humble Pie that I liked. He changed his style a lot when he came alive, shall we say. Where I didn't recognize his personality on those records, but I still thought he was great, So I was listening to those guys, Johnny Winter, Paul Kossoff, Jan Ackerman from Focus.
Yeah.
But so that along with later hearing the music with John Coltrane sort of fed my note frenzy that's in my head, like all these notes that are buzzing around. But I'm not sure that was necessarily a wise path for me.
Why is that?
Sometimes just a nice slow sound cloud could say so much more.
Yeah, but if that's not what flips your switch, man, it's not going to happen,
Well, but it is though. That's the thing. I think I'm just hyper, and maybe I'm just insecure. You know what I mean? I'm just like wiggle my fingers around and go like, "Is this okay?" I don't know.
Can I tell you something funny? I've interviewed 450 something players over the last 19 months, right? And many of the guys in our age bracket, when I ask them a question, something like, what's a low point or something, and they all say something similar to, for many years I had this feeling that I would get found out. You know, like, and it reminded me of what you said, because, you know, there's like an underlying insecurity sometimes, no matter how long. I mean, these are great guys who are seriously accomplished like you. And they're like, well, I didn't want to get found out, like, you know, that I really was just like playing around here or having fun or something like that, you know? So I think that's a very common theme.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Because it only applies to me.
Yeah. Very common theme. Extremely. I spoke to David Gilmour's bassist the other day, and he's been with Floyd since Waters left, and I think Tony Franklin did an album, and then he's been the guy. And lovely guy, real funny guy from England. And he was like, I'm finally almost at the point where I think I'm not going to get found out, you know. So
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm here in Brooklyn, where I'm basically surrounded by, the musicianship level here is so high, and I just keep getting asked to do things that I don't really think I'm skilled enough to do, but I say yes because I figure, well, I love their music, or I love this idea or whatever, and I just have to try it, you know. And so far, you know, I haven't been kicked out of any bands, but I get a lot of stress.
I'm sure. I understand it.
I come up scholastically or academically, you know what I mean, with music. So it was all kind of ass backwards.
I want to ask you about one of my favorite Wilco songs, "Side with the Seeds." It's off of Sky Blue Sky from 2007, and there's like really beautiful extremes in your playing on that song.
Yeah,
it's really
long process getting that song together. Sky Blue Sky was a really happy, but kind of, I wouldn't say arduous. It was just the most team-written Wilco record that I've been involved in. It was the first studio record that I was involved with, where Pat Sansone and I had joined the band and were experiencing our first Wilco recording. And we recorded the album in the Wilco loft in a circle with tiny little amplifiers and pretty much playing live. Even, I'd say, more than half the vocals on that record are live. And it was very team written, a lot of it, you know, a lot of the songs. And that's a great example of a song that was very collaborative. And it was initiated by a Michael Jorgensen piano part. And I remember as he worked through the chords and Jeff came up with a melody to sing, and those instrumental passages happen, it's kind of amusing for me to reflect upon the fact that when I was early on in the band, I was a little reluctant to mention my youthful obsession with the Allman Brothers band, because I didn't know how anyone would feel in the sort of I just didn't know how people thought about the Allman Brothers band at that point, since they had become this kind of other entity with Warren and later with Derek, and I don't know. You know, you never know what people are going to say or think when they're kind of older and maybe are going to repudiate something they may have liked when they were 15 or something. Well, it turned out that, of course, it was totally fine to talk about the Allman Brothers band, but at the end of coming up with that instrumental passage where Jeff and I play the melody to the song together in the middle before I go off on the end and play a million notes or whatever, we listened to the demo with Jeff and me playing in octaves. I'm playing the higher octave of the melody, and it resolves and goes back to what I guess is the third verse. And as we were listening to that demo, Jeff turned to me and he said, "There's your fucking Allman Brothers."
Touche.
Which made me incredibly happy.
Yeah.
Because I was very Jeff. It was like very funny, but at the same time, what he was doing is saying like, "Yeah, I love him too," you know, and I'm sure you're happy now, and I'm happy too. It was very sweet, actually.
That's cool, man.
But at the end, where I just sort of go off, it's not usually what I do. I usually have to be asked. So as it was recapping that sort of build towards the end, I guess I just started soloing, and everyone decided that it was okay that I solo there. So that's what happened. And I kind of like one of the parts I've done on that record, and even on some subsequent Wilco records, the stuff that I played ends up being kind of like parts. So I almost play the solos note for note because they seem like they're composed, but they weren't actually. Now they are.
So you had to go back and listen to yourself and
I just mostly replay certain key areas, and then other parts I get to do kind of whatever. But there's certain signposts and shapes that get repeated every time we play these songs. And the solo on "You Are My Face" from that record, I play note for note, and it became like a part because I always overplayed that solo. And I was living in the Wilco loft with the recording engineer T.J. Doherty, and I think Michael Jorgensen possibly, but he was living in Chicago then, so no. Anyway, I don't know. There were a couple of us in the loft, and I woke TJ up, and I was in my boxer shorts, and I said, "TJ, now, hit record now." And he recorded that solo because I was so sleepy. I hadn't had any coffee, and I just woke up and thought of how it could work in my sort of half-awake state, and we recorded that solo, which is the only solo where I didn't play too many notes.
Wow.
So now I play that solo exactly as I played it in my boxer shorts.
Yeah, I don't think you played too many notes on Side with the Seeds. It's a bunch of notes, but it's not too. The thing is, look, you go from really very deep, emotional, yet well placed passages to like an explosion. But I've never once, for whatever it's worth, like I'm nobody, but like you don't play notes for excess, just like to, hey man, I got to make sure I stick more notes in here. You're always like, when I'm listening to you, I'm always feeling like, hey man, this guy's taking me somewhere.
Well, thank you.
And it's like very purposeful.
I don't think I'll ever get away with playing as many notes in the solos in the Wilco Future as I did on Sky Blue Sky when everything was fresh and new.
That was great, man. That is
either way too. I got away with playing a bunch of notes on that. Jeff is right now, I think, much more interested in texture, and he likes to hear things that sound, I guess, they could be called technically awkward or wrong, and he's really good at doing that himself. I don't mean wrong, but I mean creating like layers of guitar that all are kind of not exactly doing the same thing, for example, is one of his favorite sounds. And he's impossible to imitate. If you hear him accomplish a layered guitar track, quite often I have to reproduce this. It's something from Star Wars, for example. I have to reproduce this live and sound kind of more like him because he's playing acoustic guitar or something. And it's almost impossible. But there's also something very skewed. It's almost misshapen, and he is very confident in his, I guess, enjoyment of that sonic texture. And so I've learned a lot. Just generally, I think singer-songwriters do not want to hear a bunch of fancy finger wiggling on their songs. And Jeff's definitely in that category for the most part. When we did Art of Almost, and it became this whole other song. It started out as this sort of Fairport Convention mid-tempo plotter, and then ended up being this sort of electronica, tour de force whirlwind, if you will. And then Jeff, after we had finished the whole arc of the song, Jeff thought, well, it'd be great if it broke down, but then it came back, and then you shred. And that was okay. I said, all right, he wants me to shred. I'll try to play a bunch of
you're like the only guitar player maybe on earth that's like reluctant about, that has the skill set to do that and is like reluctant about it. I don't know if
I have the skill set to do that, but I do have a lot of notes buzzing in my head.
Yeah.
And I also don't always like to hear that, from any guitar player. And there are certain guitarists that really send me, and most of them aren't particularly prolix in their note quotient. So and I've not really followed in their footsteps in tasteful restraint and melodiousness. So it's like,
I don't know. No, I think you're pretty melodic.
You look up to these people a lot, you know.
Who would that be?
Oh, I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, there's so many people that come to mind in the jazz world, but if I was to think of somebody who is not a jazz player, I'd have to say that the most kind of like jaw-dropping, like, I don't know, where I gasp sometimes and our tears will come to my eyes, it's Derek Trucks.
He's...
feel like they're in the presence of true artistry, but also it's so expressive and emotional. It just takes my breath away. That's, I guess, the cliche I was looking for there.
Yeah. No, let me tell you, man, I saw him. He closed down the St. Pete Blues Festival here a few years back, and I was with my son. And this is probably 4 years ago, so my son was like 25. And they did a Bob Dylan song called Down in the Flood. Mm-hmm. And I literally I'd never seen it before. I've seen hundreds of concerts, and I couldn't speak. I was speechless. And I just turned to my son and I said, man, you're never going to see what you just saw again the rest of your life. I mean, so I know exactly what you're talking about, man. I've never been affected.
I love that band. I just like the whole vibe. I like everything they're doing. It's just one of those great things for me. And most of the rest of the time, I guess I'm just paying attention to the same bands that I've always liked that are still playing, like Low and Deerhoof, but also, you know, I guess improvisers, because these are my colleagues, many of them, and many of them who've become my colleagues are people who I've listened to for decades, you know, and most of them based in New York, but not all, and I get to sort of investigate that and just feel what their music is like, and I'm kind of an instrumental music guy for the most part, but I do have my forays into pop.
Do you want to name a couple of people? Because I bet listeners would want to know.
I don't know. I mean, my mind always goes blank when I get asked this question. A lot of times it'll be something that Yuka's listening to that I get really into. You know, she had her FKA Twigs moment there, so I was really digging that record, and I love the Beyonce's Lemonade album, and but I don't spend a whole lot of time, you know, in the pop world. I guess as a listener, I'm still kind of stuck in a lot of the music that I used to like in high school. Because it's still fascinating to me, and by that I'm talking about, you know, like the early Weather Report albums, or you know, the Hobbies records, Amon Dishi Band, you know, all that stuff. Ralph Towner's music. It's all still very resonant to me and fascinating, and has so much. It's so rich that there's so much to still be revealed to me as a listener as I sort of get older and learn a few things. I still am amazed by the choices, the textures, the compositional aspects of it. So I'm kind of still mired in that, while I still I'm trying to push forward and not be a fogey or anything. Like, I'm still listening to new records. You know, I love Joshua Redman's record that he did last year, dedicated to the band Old and New Dreams that his father Dewey Redman played in. I think it's a really uplifting, kind of a joyous record. It makes me feel really good to listen to. I don't know, just a lot of stuff like that. Ron Miles, I Am a Man, it's a beautiful record. But these are jazz records. I don't know. My mind just sort of went blank on the pop front. I mean, Deerhoof are still making great records. The last Low record, Double Negative, is incredibly sick record, and I'm amazed that they can keep pushing forward and use their language and reveal it in different ways. I don't know. That's just me.
No, very cool, man. Thank you. Man, you've done so much in so many different situations. Is it possible if I ask you what knee-jerk reaction to what are the top 3 experiences you've had musically?
Oh my God! I mean, I thought that I might get asked this. This is really a tough one.
It is it's not like you've been sitting home and you haven't left the house.
So I've done so many things I never would do, because I wasn't. It wasn't like I printed up a bunch of business cards and then stood outside some nightclub saying like, hire me, please hire me. Here's my card. I have to say that when I was in my 20s and I was playing in Charlie Hayden's Liberation Music Orchestra West Coast, that Charlie Hayden being one of my musical heroes, the opportunity to play with him, and I was super nervous. I was the youngest guy, the non-union guy, working in a record store guy, but just the opportunity to be able to improvise next to Charlie and him doing his moving harmonic thing and playing. I was playing nylon string guitar, and that was extremely exciting. So that was way up there, but oh man, I just can't believe what the things I've gotten to do. It's kind of crazy because I know there are people who are way more skilled, musically skilled than I am, but I sometimes I marvel that I get asked to do the things I get asked to do. But
it's not really your skill set.
I'm about to sub for Ben Monder in the Maria Schneider Orchestra, and I'm terrified because I love Maria's music, and she's amazing. And I just met her. My wife and I just met her recently when she had a run at the Jazz Standard, and I'm going to do my best.
That's cool, man.
The thing that I never thought I would do. I love playing. I know I'm forgetting some really important stuff. Certainly I never thought I'd join Wilco, but also I never thought I'd play with Yoko Ono Plastic Ono Band. I never thought I would play with Yuka Honda, for example, as a Cibo Matto fan. I ended up playing with Cibo Matto. That was amazing. I don't know. It's just, I love playing with Zena Parkins. She's an incredible improviser, musician, harp player, visionary. We have good chemistry. Playing with Julian Lage has been one of the most amazing gifts to my life. We're going to keep our duo going. I'm not sure how much more quartet work I can book because Julian's star is deservedly on the rise, and he's a very busy young man doing amazing music, and his new record just came out. Love Her. It's a really good trio record from Julian. But we'll keep our duo going, and that duo work, the tours, the recording, everything we've been able to do, that's some of the music I treasure the most in my life so far.
Very cool. Do you know Chris Eldridge?
I've met Chris, and I've heard Julian and Chris play together several times, and I've heard the Punch Brothers play, and Chris is a badass.
Yeah,
duo is great.
Yeah, I interviewed Chris. He was great, and he I'd really enjoys playing with Julian as well. So
they just got their Grammy.
Yeah,
the brothers.
Well deserved.
I was on tour with my quartet with Julian and Tom Rainey and Jorge Roeder when they got their Grammy, and Julian was so stoked. But he was up for a Grammy too, but he didn't get it. That's life.
Yeah.
He was very sanguine. He didn't care.
Hey, your twin brother, and you mentioned Alex earlier. Any funny twin stories growing up as kids?
Well, not the stuff you probably think. It was like, oh yeah, we went to different classes and fooled everybody, or like dated the same girlfriends. No,
nothing like that.
We looked completely different from each other, so we never thought we could fool anybody.
Oh, okay.
But I have to say that having Alex as my twin brother is certainly not the greatest recipe for socialization, because we had each other all the time, and we got really interested in music and culture that few people were interested in our age group. So we could go deep into our own world, and it didn't matter because we had each other and did everything together growing up, and that included listening to records and playing music. And Alex was always a really good drummer, so as I was my primitive self, playing with two fingers and knowing no chords or scales, always had this amazing drummer to play with, and we had a sort of unity of purpose. And then we heard, Bitches Brew and Intermounting Flame and all these kinds of records, Weather Report, as I mentioned before, or Herbie Hancock's records, Tony Williams' Lifetime. We just shifted right into that, and we heard Our Ensemble of Chicago, and they had all these what they called little instruments in the AACM, and so we went out and got all the raided my mother's kitchen for things that sound, and wanted to get Brazilian percussion instruments to get that airto domo normal thing going, and so we always had that sort of unity of purpose and direction, and that's the coolest thing.
I think that's wonderful, man. Honestly.
Yeah, I mean, eventually I had to sort of start playing with drummers that I didn't have very good chemistry with, because it was so automatic playing with Alex that when we would even do completely spontaneous improvisation, it'd sound sort of like we rehearsed it or something.
Sure.
So it was kind of a growth experience for me to pull away from that.
Oh, yeah.
He's the only guy I would ever have wanted to play the music from Lovers, because of his ability to shade and use cymbals, and his feel. Everything is just, he's kind of a cinematic, very respectful, and understands the ritual power of music also. So it's like, when I want that, it's there. I don't have to say anything. It's nice to not have to explain yourself.
What prompted you to do that? It's about like relationships and stuff. Do you have a particular like interest in that or expertise, or what was
the Lovers record you're asking about?
Yeah.
Well, it was really more born out of the idea of the mood music record, from working in a record store for almost 10 years, and in the late 70s, or from 76 to 85, I guess. I worked at Rhino Records in West Los Angeles, and we had all these, or actually I took all these, 50 cent, 25 cent mood music records with these hilarious covers, and I put them all over the bathroom. Then I sort of became interested in what content they might have. And while Lovers is in no way an attempt to mimic a mood music record, it made me ponder what a mood music record would be like if it was more artistic and if it was more honest. So in other words, if it had some of the darker elements of so-called romance, which mood music records are quite often supposed to be inspiring. You're supposed to, you see the cover with the martini glasses and the cigarettes in the ashtray and the opera clutch gloves or whatever, and you just think, ooh, what's happening outside the picture frame?
Right.
Or you put it on and dim the lights and mix the martinis and sit too close to somebody on the couch and then hope for the best. So rather than that, I thought, what would a mood music record be like if it was a beautiful, jazz record, much like, let's say, Sketches of Spain or Stan Gets Focus, or some of the Johnny Mandel soundtracks like I Want to Live, or just all these different things that inspire me, and also the ballads of Ellington and Strayhorn, and these incredible, incredible songs. But then if the material itself was drawn from maybe more unexpected areas, so combined with so-called jazz standards, I came up with the idea, and this was many, many, many years before I ever actually was able to do it, of combining movie soundtrack and whatnot, music from movies that were not about comforting romantic topics, that were kind of kinky or weird or dark and disturbing. And so the original version of Lovers would have been a lot darker and also a lot shorter. But then about 20-some years went by, and I was able to finally do it, and the list kept getting longer, and my life got happier, and whatever. It came out a little lighter, brighter, and more reassuring than the original version would have been.
Interesting.
But it still had some of the same pieces. For example, Cry Want by Jimmy Jufrey, which is a rather dark kind of blues piece, and really beautiful. The theme from the Charlotte Rampling movie The Night Porter, which is quite a transgressive tale of sexual obsession and dominance and submission and self-destruction in a way, I guess. And at Peacock's ballad Touching, I always wanted on there. I added So Hard It Hurts to get a little sexual violence in there a little later in the game. So these were pieces that I was thinking about doing all along. And then on the wistful romantic side, Secret Love, which was inspired by me hearing it played by Jim Hall Trio. And Beautiful Love, which I was actually more familiar with from hearing Bill Evans and also John Abercrombie play it. John really liked playing that piece. So built into the record is also kind of these little layered homage to some of my favorite guitar players, like John and Jim Hall and Mark Rebo and George Benson, Grant Green, Wes. Not that I'm playing like them. I can't play like those guys, but I'm inspired by listening to those. And so I wanted to have some tone, and like the version of Secret Love has this heartbeat, this polyrhythmic chord cluster that I came up with, and I reharmonized the bridge, and Michael Leonard orchestrated it to perfection. And I always thought that Jim Hall would love. I played in A flat major, which is what the Jim Hall trio played in, and I just thought that Jim would be so entertained by this wacky version of Secret Love. But then he passed away the last day of tracking, so that was a real bummer. But his spirit is really deeply in that record. Not his musicianship per se, because I can't touch that, but I could really, really be inspired by his music to continue to finish Lovers, to actually do it, because I'm no jazz wizard, you know what I mean? I just wanted that aesthetic to be represented.
Have you ever heard of this record by a guy named Mundell Lowe? It's like something.
Well, I don't playing, but I don't know the record. Probably, I actually took a guitar seminar with him once.
Did you really? It's Blues for a Stripper or something like that.
Oh no, I remember this cover, but I never heard the record.
Yeah, it's pretty good, man.
Okay, I should check it out, because his playing was very like he was very laconic. He's very low key and laconic guy. I thought he was actually going to fall asleep.
It's pretty good. Well orchestrated. It's called Blues for a Stripper. It's got a cool. Listen to the soundtrack, because it sounds like it was. There's the original and the soundtrack. It's the same songs. It just sounds like it's engineered or mastered to mix a little better on the soundtrack. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's funny, man.
Oh, he's a great player. He was, kind of a session player mostly in Los Angeles. Along with some of the other people I took seminars with that year. This was in the mid 70s, so it was a long time ago. Howard Roberts was one of them, and he was kind of one of my heroes, actually. And he was amazing. He was such a crazy, amazing dude. And he had just released a record then called Equinox Express Elevator, which is a really eccentric record, and I recommend highly.
What is it called?
Equinox Express Elevator. You can probably get it for $2 or $3 somewhere. It has him in an elevator on the cover, being served by the producer of the record, Ed Michel. You're the gentleman with the waiter's outfit on.
That's so funny.
John Guerin's on drums. I can't remember all the personnel right now, but it's a lot of session heavy guys doing some pretty out music.
I'm going to check that out. Hey, what prompted you to move to New York? And I was curious, what do you like most about it?
Oh, geez. Well, what prompted me to move to New York was meeting my wife.
Yeah, okay. So I thought.
And that was sort of one of the happiest things in the world unto itself, but it also meant that I was going to finally move to New York, where I'd thought about living since 1976. So I always figured that New York would chew me up and spit me out if I came here to so-called, quote unquote, make it.
Right.
But as I visited New York with my family in the late 60s, and then came here with my brother Alex in 76 on a jazz pilgrimage. And it was then that it was such a foreign country coming from Los Angeles. I mean,
well, the 70s was literally the worst time.
It was bankrupt and blah, blah, blah. I didn't know any of that at the time, I don't think. But I just remember it feeling like a foreign country and being, it was pretty gnarly for sure. I really, really liked it. And we have a really good family friend who's still here that we could stay with and hang out with. And he sort of kept an eye on us. And I just love New York. So every time I would come here in the 80s, it would be to play music, interact with certain musicians that I still play with, like Tim Byrne and Mark Dresser and Mark Feldman even, and Jim Black. And so, I would tour here in the 90s, for example, with the Geraldine Fibbers or with Mike Watt or with whomever. And I would cry when I would leave New York. I just never wanted to leave. I would get in the van and we'd start driving to Philadelphia or something, and tears streaming down my face, like, no, I don't want to leave. So, but then my life got kind of happier for a while in the 90s when I had a relationship that was really nice, and I embraced Los Angeles in a way that I hadn't, I suppose, and learned more about my hometown, and so I was kind of cool with staying for a while. But then that sort of got a little bit, what do you want to say? It sort of scuttled. It went on the rocks. Whatever, all the cliches we could. So then I started thinking, well, what am I doing here? But then when I did this record called Floored by Four for Mike Watt, with Dougie Bound on drums and Yuka on keyboards, we just sort of hit it off and fell in love and all that stuff. And then I started living in New York. What do I love about it besides that Yuka's here?
Only 20 years, 25 years later than never, but better.
It took forever. I'm so happy it happened. I mean, the only thing I don't like about it is how expensive it is to live here. But even whatever the headaches are with congestion and so much humanity crammed into a small space, after being in my car my whole life, driving around Los Angeles, I like the proximity to humanity. Yeah. I prefer it, I should say. I didn't really move here for the deep bench that's here musically, but boy, oh boy, is it deeper than I even thought. So yeah. I'm enjoying that. I've made a lot of really good musical friends here, and we're all pretty much, we could almost walk to each other's places, some of this, and that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I've interviewed a ton of guys in Brooklyn.
It just feels like a real community, so I dig it.
Very cool, man.
Hope I can stay.
No, why not, man?
Well, if I can't, I mean, I'm not like, if I'd written some of the songs that you hear Wilco play, maybe I'd be doing a little better. I'd be more secure in my financial realm. But man, New York's a harsh mistress when it comes to money.
I know it is.
So we're doing the best we can here. We'll hang on as long as possible. I don't own anything, so it's too late. It's too late to own. So I have to get a tattoo. It's going to say "Born to Rent."
Hey, you and everybody else in the city, you know, there's no regular folks that could afford to own anything there. You know, it's really prohibitive.
That's one of the things I love about moving. We were living in the West Village with friends, and that was really lovely. But I also think that when we moved to Brooklyn, and we're in Prospect Heights now, that's the regular folks are out here, and it's mostly. It's changing already, and I'm feeling the influx of the professional moneyed people, but it's really different from the West Village. I'll say that.
I love the West Village, man. I hung out there every weekend of my life from like 17 on or 15 on or something.
That was the place to be back then, man.
I remember going to see Rocky Horror at midnight.
Oh, nice.
You know, the 8th Street Playhouse, and
when my brother and I came in 67 and 68, 67 was amazing, I have to say. I mean, we went to this place called Infinite Posters Incorporated or something like that, and a whole room of blacklight posters where we just sit there for an hour just with all the black lights on. It was heaven, and we just loved the whole vibe of it.
You know, until like maybe, you probably know this place, maybe up until 10 years ago down on Bleecker Street, they had they had a big poster place and a more commercial one up top. But I remember going to places just like that as a kid. I mean, it was just phenomenal.
Yeah. Amazing.
You just mentioned something that's really common about the cost of living in New York. Along those lines, what were some of the lower points or maybe the bigger obstacles that you've had to deal with over your career, and how did you get through them? Either personal, music, business, you pick.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about because basically I have what I could consider to be like white male privilege working in my favor, because my parents were very encouraging of artistic endeavor and artistic direction. I never got a degree in anything. I was definitely discouraged scholastically from pursuing music as an academic thing because I was told I had started too late, which would have been high school when I was just learning the nuts and bolts of music. I would say that overall I've led quite a charmed existence. You know, I worked book and record store jobs for 18 years and played. And certainly the hardest thing was just being able to pay my rent. I mean, to be honest, it became increasingly difficult when I decided to stop working at the day job. That was around 1998, and just try to make it playing music, and that put a whole bunch of stress into my life. For a minute, I had the tiny little publishing deal, and then that dissipated and disappeared in 9 months. And I thought I was living large. I was living on $1,300 a month.
Wow.
There was a stipend, a publishing stipend. I was like, man, this is incredible. It's like, wow, it's so much money. I don't have to go to work every day. This is amazing. But it didn't last. And then I had to just keep playing and do whatever I could. And it's not a lie when I say that, when I've said that I was going to get another day job when Jeff Tweedy called and asked me to consider joining Wilco, because I was just losing my mind with stress, just trying to make enough money to pay $600 a month rent, which was, of course, now in Los Angeles, it's impossible to have rent that low.
Sure.
So I'd say that I think the low point was that moment, in terms of whatever career, because I never really thought of myself as having a career. I just was playing, I just wanted to play music I like with people I like.
Yeah.
But the low point was that moment when I was driving down Highway 5 from the Bay Area and thinking to myself, I have to get a job, because I actually thought for years and years, decades, that every year was better than the last year, and that this is the year I'm going to actually be okay, and things are going to take off. And, I'd been in a rock and roll kind of funk band in Los Angeles called Block for almost 8 years.
Block, BLOC?
Yeah.
Ken Andrews did that video for you guys.
Yes, that's right. Oh my God.
Yeah, I interviewed Ken.
Oh my God, insane.
And he talked about
five of us for almost 8 years, and then when A&M signed us and dropped us, I could finally quit the band because I was going insane. And I love these guys, and we worked really hard, but only in Los Angeles. We never toured, and it became this kind of dysfunctional family. But that was one of my attempts at sticking with it, because I just needed to get out of the day job scene. I wanted to make a living playing music, and so that wasn't really a low ebb when we got signed. It was liberation. But years later, when I started feeling delusional in 2004, it was the first time I'd ever felt like I'd maybe been kidding myself all these years,
Wow.
So that was really, really bad, because I think I was, guilty isn't the right word, but I think I was evincing magical thinking is what I kept thinking. Like seriously, dude, it's time to wake up and face the fact that you were kidding yourself all this time, and you should just get a job, because you're going insane with stress and you're not going where you thought you were going. So that was pretty low. That was a low. I had personal low moments. Like, I was married in 1981, and in 1985, my wife was hit by a drunk driver in her car. Oh my
God.
Weeks after my father died. And
holy shit, man. Give me a second. This is fucking heavy, man.
Head injury. But to be honest, I took a really positive attitude towards that, and really fought through that. And she had short-term memory loss for the rest of her life, and she's fine. We're still friends. She lives in Portugal now, and she's an amazing person. But the challenges that presented, not just in terms of our relationship, but for her specifically, were almost insurmountable. But she's a toughie, and she's gotten through it. But that was hard.
Man, hold on a minute.
That's like real life. That's not.
That's really heavy shit, man. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. I'm sorry for that whole situation.
Well, it could have been so much worse. Right?
Yeah. I know, and that's how you have to look at stuff like that. But it's
they don't tell you what's happened after an accident like that. So, in the waiting room at 3:30 in the morning or whatever it was, my mind was just imagining a million things that happened to her. And so, there's gnarly stuff happening this second everywhere. So I'm not complaining is what I'm saying.
No.
The dark things come from, I think, moments when one is depressed, and also just feeling like I've let myself down, or feeling like I'm not any good. You know what I mean? That's normal stuff. I almost quit playing at one point because I couldn't reconcile, and this is very Western dichotomous thinking, I couldn't reconcile the differences between acoustic and electric and jazz and rock and all these different things I wanted to do, and I didn't know how to put it together, and it was driving me crazy. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll play acoustic bass. I play contrabass because I love bass. And I thought, well, okay, those basses cost a lot of money and they're hard to carry around. Maybe that's not the greatest idea. Well, what would I do if I didn't play music at all? And I would either be a writer or I do visual art. Well, there's a good way to not make any money, And for solitary endeavors, I would be tormenting myself, but be alone doing it instead of being able to collaborate with people, which I love.
Right.
The collaborative nature of music making. So,
which is interesting because you said that one of the tough things was growing up with Alex didn't help your social skills, yet you enjoy collaboration. That's almost like a kind of a dichotomy there, Well,
yeah. I mean, the thing is that when we were kids, we were more resilient, There was a time when we were so obsessed with records when we were 12. All we wanted to do was hang around with our friends and make them listen to the records we were into, and instead of going bowling and stuff.
It's like when you go to someone's house and say, "Hey, no, I know you didn't see the wedding video. Come."
Yeah, pretty much. So basically, all these friends stopped even talking to us when we went to junior high school. They actually would not say hello to us in the halls, and so we just found friends that liked music, and we were perplexed and somewhat hurt, but if that happened to me now, I'd be so much more hurt. But I am kind of, in spite of what I described, I guess, as socially awkward growing up, I'm kind of a people person, Greg.
You're a whole mixed bag here, Nels. I've got
teenage years are not exactly comfortable for a lot of people, and I'm definitely one of those people for whom the teenage years were beyond awkward. So.
Oh yeah, I don't think it. I mean, I've raised 3 kids, and as a parent watching kids, I feel bad for, and then to think about my own teenagers, same thing. I just think that's a horrible period for you have these 2 or 3 kids that are just like all the sports and this, and they're great looking and everybody loves them. But man, that's a few and far between in my world. I haven't met too many of those people like that, I think
the thing is, you can always tell anybody whether that's happening or whether they're awkward. You can always tell them it's going to get better.
Yeah, it's going to get better. Which it's like, well, you tell it to a teenage kid, it's like saying, hey, you should put money in an IRA.
Believe me. You don't want to be one of those people looking back and thinking high school was the greatest time ever, but certainly teenagers don't listen.
No, hell no.
I didn't listen. I thought I knew everything when I was 18 for sure. My parents crazy. My parents are really cool though.
That's great, man. If you could go back and give advice to younger Nels Cline, what advice would you have given yourself, career-wise or personal, that would have made your life easier?
Well, I mean, career-wise, I would simply say that in spite of the damage inflicted by a terrible teacher, guitar teacher that I had for only a few months in high school, that I not allow myself to become unhinged by the fact that he did kind of made music seem impenetrable and made me feel like I'd never be able to read music or understand it, because he was terrible. And I to this day, don't understand what he thought he was going to teach me the way he was teaching me. And he was old school, so he was into this kind of hazing thing. And it really, really messed me up. And I would be happy to go back in time and tell my 17-year-old self, this guy actually doesn't know anything. You need to get away from him and find a decent teacher, and you will learn and excel. Instead, I would have a complete physical stress reaction every time somebody put music in front of me.
Oh my God.
So as a result, my sight reading is still horrendous, and I've taught myself to read somewhat and to write music, which I do still completely by hand. I don't use Sibelius or any of these.
Wow.
and when I have to do a big score or transpose a whole lot of parts, I just enlist the services of a smart young musician who's completely Sibelius or whatever program savvy. So that would be my advice musically to my young self. And I guess if I was to give myself personal advice, that's a little more of a thorny and maybe at the same time subtle issue, which would just be to not worry so much about everything in terms of my abilities, and be more, I guess, forthright and brave about my own path. I always felt brave and fine about doing original music. So there is the side of me that had some confidence, but when it came to other things, particularly working with musicians who were really skilled and for whom I was going to have to read music and learn a ton of music, of their music, I was always terrified. So I think a lot of the sort of self-esteem issues that I still struggle with were so huge at that point that they got in the way. So personally, I would like to tell my young self, you don't have to do gigs like that if they're going to not be inspiring or if they're going to mess me up psychologically, or I could just take the bull by the horns and be, tenacious and braver and learn and just make mistakes and forge ahead. So that's about it. But, in the long run, there was something about wanting to do original music based on what I was inspired by back then that enabled me to always do music I liked. So with people that I liked. So I'm not sure that being some kind of, big pro would have been the path for me anyway. If I look at it in a more sanguine way, I never got jaded or burned out like a lot of musicians who just are obber musicians. And I always had ideas. So, and by ideas, I mean compositional ideas, ideas about sound and improvisation, and a goal in mind that had more to do with following the path of artists that I admired, because that's what was happening then. It was when I was really trying to figure music out, it was the early to mid 70s. And I was able to play with my twin brother, Alex, and usually one or two or three other people. And we do our own music, and we were satisfied doing our own music. We didn't think it sucked. We didn't think we didn't deserve to be playing our own music, because that was the zeitgeist, and it was also, I guess, how we were built. So, I just sort of have over-amplified or probably overemphasized these little psychological blips and struggles, and they still dog me, which is kind of absurd at my age, but such is life.
No, I think that kind of shit dogs I think that we all drag a lot of baggage like that into our life for a long time, and I think you have to constantly be aware of it and stay on top of it to sort of like, I don't know, like I will talk to myself when I'm in, when something from the past is dragging me down, and I think I agree with you. It's just the way it is sometimes, depending upon the extent of the damage, if you want to call it that. But you have to feel pretty good, Nels, about what you've accomplished. Look, I know you have no ego, and like all these lists and what everybody else says about you is nice, but that doesn't, like, you're not going to bed like, wow, I'm so happy everybody thinks I'm good. I know that, but you have to feel pretty good about where you started and the catalog and the depth and breadth of the music you've made is like really very, wide, man. Not many people fill a gap that big with original things. And you have joy about it.
I'd have to say, yeah. I mean, it is amazing to me. I recently did I participated in some concerts for my friend Joel Harrison's Alternative Guitar Summit, and he managed to get Ralph Towner to come to New York, and Ralph did a little U.S. run as a result of this, playing solo nylon string guitar, and Joel got the idea to have a tribute to Ralph. He likes to do these tribute concerts called While They're Still Here.
That's really cool, actually.
He honors a composer and an instrumentalist who's still alive that many of us admire. And so in this case, it was Ralph, who I met in the mid-'70s as a super fan, like a sort of neurotic, tentative but needy super fan. So Ralph came from where he lives in Italy these days, and we played this tribute concert for an audience that included Ralph Towner. And so this was, Joel Harrison and Brett Bradshepik and Ben Monder and Lenny Stern and Jan Riley. Steve Cardenas ended up playing. Vic Juris. It was quite an amazing
major guys there, man.
So yes, of course I was nervous about it, but Ralph being so generous and relaxed, I mean, it wasn't absolutely abject terror. It was kind of some inspiration but also it did my heart really, really good to see him. I haven't seen him in quite a long time. But I said from the stage at that concert, Ralph, when you met me back in, I believe, 1975, I don't know that you would have picked me on the likely to succeed list, So when I look back on the various, I guess, struggles that we've just sort of described, that one goes through about self-confidence and skill set and all that, yeah, man, I'm amazed that I've gotten this far, and particularly in light of the fact that I never have hustled for a gig. I've tried to book little tours for, say, my old trio, the Nels Cline Trio, or for the singers, rather unsuccessfully, I might add. But in terms of just, getting work or whatever, I have never called up anybody and said, "Hey, need a guitarist?" Or written to anybody. So it just, stuff comes along and I try to do it, So that does amaze me. And yeah, sure, I feel really happy in my life at this point.
Yeah, you've got a great catalog. I mean, not many people have ventured this wide, man. That's just...
Well, that might be because I don't have a style and because I can't say no to things.
No, but you do what you like, man. You said that. You said, I realized I could do what I like with people I like. And man, that, that's awesome that that you've done this much and you liked it, and you know what I'm saying? That it wasn't just for the paycheck. It was, hey, I like this stuff. Let me do this. And I like these people. Let me do it with them. I mean, that's
the biggest shift or the biggest challenge on this topic for me was really joining Wilco. And I don't mean in an artistic sense, because though I wasn't looking to join a rock and roll band at that time, I knew that it would afford me a lot of latitude, that it would be creative, and that, Jeff Tweedy writes amazing songs. But I definitely needed to start making a living so I could pay my bills, because I was struggling so heavily. But I knew when I accepted that gig, it would affect my personal relationship that I was in at the time, which it did. And that relationship eventually fell apart. And that is maybe the only kind of, it's not a regret, because I don't have any regrets about joining Wilco, but it did have a careerist aspect to it, if you will, and it wasn't me thinking like, oh, now I'm going to finally get ahead. It was really, oh, now I'm actually going to lose stress from my life.
Yeah.
And play a lot, and play more, and still be able to play creative music of my own and of others and improvise. So, but it did affect my personal relationship then and pretty much wreck it. But it might have been falling apart in some regards anyway, and I won't go into that. But that kind of tore me up and made me think, oh, gee, what am I? Am I some sort of careerist, reptile? But looking back, everything kind of has worked out, and that relationship now is a friendship that's really ongoing and beautiful, and things are cool.
That's good, man. Yeah, I often, I don't know how those things work. This is my second marriage, but I don't know. I don't know how things, I don't know what causes those kinds of things. And how much of that could you have changed? Who the hell knows,
Right.
It's
And also, I mean, let's admit it, the road life is not conducive to most relationships' success. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's a tough thing. I know a handful of people for whom it works really, really well, but it's one of those challenges, yeah. And I guess it's a sacrifice if you think about it that way. And I am definitely a person who likes to go out and play, so that's what I try to do, and I do it a lot these days.
Let's talk about gear, and thank you for that. That
right
was
on.
very
gear.
Honest. Finally, since it's a guitar show, I have a note here. So my question is, what's your go-to guitar right now, and what other 2 or 3 guitars would round out your top? But I have a note here that said Jason Orme, Alanis Morissette, show versus studio, and I don't even remember what that is. Does any of that ring a bell?
No, not really, although show versus studio does. We can talk about that from a gear standpoint.
Yeah.
But just to answer your question, I might have to mention more than 2 or 3 guitars, but I'll be try to be succinct, which is certainly not my strength. But anyway.
Honesty is greater than, brevity in this case. That's fine.
Well, go-to guitar is still the same, what turned out to be an early 1960, not 1959, Fender Jazzmaster that I bought from Mike Watt in 1995. It's what I play with Wilco. It's what I played with Watt. After the Ball Hogger Tugboat record, I tracked that record with my 66 Fender Jaguar, which had been my main guitar for a few years before that. And I played in the Geraldine Fibbers, and it's just a really great sounding guitar. I've abused it, and thank goodness Fenders are very tough guitars, so it's still in one piece, although most of it is no longer original because of a combination of simple aging, like the cracking pick guard, or the warped plate on the tremolo assembly. So I've had to replace things like that. And back in the Fibbers days, I used to just throw it around, and switches broke off routinely. And but the guitar is a beautiful guitar, and I have here in New York a commensurate instrument. It's an early '59 Jazzmaster that I play all the time. So the Fender Jazzmaster on the electric guitar front is my guitar of choice, preferably one before the mid-'60s, so-called slab board, now rather costly instruments back not costly because no one wanted to play them. Mine are all outfitted with the Mastery bridge and some with the Mastery tremolo when I destroy the tremolo assembly, which I've done on 3 of them. From overuse, one might say. And why the Jazzmaster? There's so many reasons. It has to do with strings behind the bridge, which is crucial to certain sounds that I enjoy making, the shape of the guitar, and the neck profile in general. And
what's the neck profile on that like?
I know nothing about guitars, Craig. So
I mean, like, is it flat? Is it fat? Is it chunky? Is it thin?
No, it's not chunky. It feels good. They're also different from year to year. So, but I'm the kind of guy that doesn't even notice when it's that different. So I played really, early '50s ones where the right at the nut, it's really slender. It's like just in terms of the width, not the width, where the curved part is, but where the nut is. It's like really narrow, and that's not quite as appealing to me because I have long fingers. But anyway, historically, I know nothing. If we would ask Jeff Tweedy or my friend John Woodland, who makes the Mastery products, we could find out everything, and they could tell you year to year what changed in the terms of the dimensions of the guitar. But the other thing that I love about the Jazzmaster, besides they're very beefy and versatile instruments sonically, is the extra string length. So, because I play with a pretty heavy string set because I play hard, and so the instrument as such then doesn't choke or squash out, and I can get a lot of nice sustain or just a lot of sound out of one note as opposed to some thin kind of, I don't know, polite sound. But I do have fake Jazzmasters, a couple of them outfitted with custom order Seymour Duncan PAFs that look like Jazzmaster pickups, because the biggest challenge about a Jazzmaster in the recording world, to mention studio work, and in some venues with bad electricity, is how much hum comes out of those pickups. So, I mean, they really hum like crazy. I remember hearing Tom Verlaine play back in the 80s. He was on I believe a tour in support of Words from the Front, but it might have been Dreamtime. But anyway, and he was playing back when he was still playing a Jazzmaster, he had his Jazzmaster and he had a Risson amp, which you don't see much anymore. Oh. And I remember just an insane amount of 60 cycle hum coming out of his thing. I couldn't believe it. It was the kind of thing I never even noticed much back then. But I had started out as a Gibson guy, and I still love Gibson guitars, but I was, as we discussed earlier, using people like Duane Allman and Peter Banks and Steve Howe and Johnny Winter and guys like this as my role models on guitar, rather than Jimi Hendrix, who I thought was untouchable and magical and sacred,
Yeah.
So I had deigned to be a Gibson guy, Gibson or bust kind of guy. So I went right into humbucker pickups when I got my first good guitar, which was my 335 that I still have.
Really? What year is that?
71. I mean, I bought it new in 71. There was no vintage guitar market then, so I would have had to find a good used one, which would have entailed maybe driving all over California or the country just looking at used guitars. You know what I mean? There was no vintage market, and you just luck out if you could find a used thing.
It's not like the internet.
No. I mean, that was, I guess, if you had money back then and you were touring, it was a lot of fun.
Sure.
To just go to pawn shops and music stores, and you never knew what you were going to find. But I didn't have any money, and I wasn't touring really, so I just had to go to the local music store. And my father inherited some money from his aunt when she passed away, and said, "Okay, you seem serious. You can finally get a good guitar." So the 335 was my fourth guitar. The other three were Japanese guitars of, anyway, they were what they were. They were cheap. That's what was around in the 60s. Yeah. You get these Teisco Del Reys, or in my case, a Melody, and then a Pen, and then a Univox Les Paul copy, and then the 335. So I was a humbucker guy, and we don't have to worry about hum with these pickups. So I didn't confront the deadly 60 cycle or whatever country you're in hum until I started playing my Jaguar regularly, which I bought after being inspired by Sonic Youth, and I just wanted to play a guitar with strings behind the bridge to get some of these sounds. And when I picked one up, the so-called offset body, this is a term I didn't even know until 2 or 3 years ago. But anyway, I just loved the whole feel of it. So everything about it spoke to me, and I just sort of soldiered on with that, those instruments, That said, I have a lot of guitars, and I really like the qualities of other guitars as well. So in the top, let's say 5 now, and only talking about electric guitars, I really like Dan Electro and Silvertone guitars,
Silvertone
pickups, and the Masonite, the super cheapo but really expressive, and I use them to play a different style, to play maybe more note bending, more twang. So I have a lighter setup. I'll use 11s on those and bend notes liberally, which I don't do much in my own music.
What are you playing normally, string gauge wise?
12s on my Jazzmasters and Jaguar.
Wow, shit. That's some pretty heavy strings, yeah.
Yeah, well, I like the tension, I guess.
Yeah.
So I love those, Jerry Jones made these beautiful Dano reissue type things. He's retired now. I have quite a few of his instruments with kind of like high quality Dan Electros. And I've got Dan Electro and Silvertones that I adore. So they're kind of my next choice stylistically for more note bending, and rather than a Telecaster or something like that. And I do have a couple of fake tellies, but I really like these Silvertones and Dan Electros and Jerry Jones guitars. And then on the so-called jazz front, that's a whole other kettle of fish, meaning by jazz, I mean when I'm playing, say, with Julian Lage in duet, or playing some of the material from my record Lovers. I went for a Gibson Barney Kessel, which was inspired by Mr. Tweedy, who loves these guitars. And they're not really considered particularly serious jazz guitars, I don't think, but the neck profile is amazing. It's super racy and slender, and it has two humbuckers. Mine has I replaced the neck pickup with a custom pickup made by my friend Bob Palmieri in Chicago, because sometimes these humbuckers sound a little clanky to me, and I always find myself rolling the tone knob down. And so I have that, and I have one of these Korean D'Angelico guitars that these guys gave me, which are astonishingly good quality. I have the regular jazz box. I think it's called the EXL1 or something. And I've been playing that guitar with Chris Lightcap quite a bit. He's playing upright bass, and we play some duo work, and I've been doing a lot of stuff with Chris. And that guitar is really cool. But I tend to go for those guitars for the feel of them and the acoustic properties, because I'm playing very low volume. So I'm playing at such low volume that you can really kind of hear the guitar acoustically. And also they lend themselves to a certain kind of facility, playing complex chords and racing around the neck. And those have 13s.
Holy crap.
Well, I'm not bending notes on those guitars. I'm playing.
Still, that's a pretty fix.
More mystically, and I'm not using distortion or anything. I'm playing those. When Julian and I play as a duo, we play our little lunchbox, CT lunchbox amps, and plug directly into them. We bring them on tour. They're literally the size of a lunchbox. And we play at a really low volume and don't use any tuners or pedals of any sort. We just bring our tuning fork. And so it doesn't feed back at all, and the sound is very natural and almost acoustic. And so those are sort of the electric guitars of choice. But why do I have so many other electric guitars? I have this bad disease where I just fall in love with guitars. And I also have some amazing luthier friends who've given me guitars, with the nice people at Collings, or my friend Jim LeClaire in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, the Claire Tellys.
Yeah, and he's made some really cool guitars, some of which he gave me, some of which I bought, and my friends at the Built Guitar Company in Des Moines make some cool offset type guitars, and I've known them for a long time, so I bought some of their stuff. But truth be told, Jeff Tweedy asked me one time. He just happened to be standing next to me in the loft, and he said, "Nels, if it came right down to it, you could just always play Jazzmasters, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I could." But I fall in love with these '60s goofy guitars, like goofball guitars. I keep thinking like, oh, this would be great for recording. I'll have this kind of needly tone that only '60s guitars have, that no one has on guitars anymore. And then I find I've bought 10 cheap guitars that have the same needly tone, you know what I mean? But I guess I probably also fell in love with how cool they looked or something. And then, I've been playing acoustic guitars forever, and was in an all-acoustic group for 11 years in California called Quartet Music. And my primary guitars back then, I still have. It was a 52 Martin 0017, an early Taylor 12-string with a jumbo type body, and just a cheapo little nylon string made by Kazuo Yairi Company in Japan. I now have a Martin nylon string. I can't remember what year it is, but I think it's called like a 24G, 024G. I don't know. They aren't known for nylon string guitars, but this is really great for recording. It wouldn't fill up a concert hall. And I have a beautiful little Collings 12 string. But those are kind of like, that's a top list right there. With Wilco, I have a whole lot of other options. And on the Wilco album Star Wars, there's quite a lot of guitar work that Jeff did. And he's playing acoustic guitar on some of these songs, so I need to play his electric guitar parts, especially since there aren't guitar solos per se on some of these songs. So I play a Les Paul quite a bit that he gave me years and years ago, a chambered Les Paul. I think they were calling it the Cloud back then in the early 2000s or something. And so that is almost like, and I have 11s on that, so I can bend notes from here till tomorrow because it's so. You said
you hold up your hands. You said you have big hands, right?
Well, I mean, my fingers are long.
Fingers are long.
But I'm like a whole other person when I play that Les Paul. There's something about it where sometimes I think, gee, I actually know what to play when I'm playing just sort of blues rock on this Les Paul with my Klon Centaur on. It just sounds so.
The Jimmy Page in you comes out.
Yeah, it's kind of. Maybe not so much the Page, but maybe the Dwayne, or Keith, and the Warren, and I mean, I kind of need with Wilco, I need at least one humbucker guitar, and then my sort of Fender thing, and a 12 string. I have a Jerry Jones Neptune 12 string. I've been playing with Wilco since the beginning of my tenure with the band, and I love it.
So many people have told me they love the Jerry Jones guitars, man. I mean, like first class. That's what everybody says who owns one.
Yeah, I have quite a few. I mean, right before he retired, I got a Guitar Lin and a backup 12 string because he just, sold everything and basically, I guess, put up a sign that said "Gone Fishing" or something.
For him.
Yeah, it's beautiful stuff.
Do you if I wanted to look at a Jazzmaster like in the last 20 years, would that be okay? I mean, what do you think of those guitars?
We're going to get into a little controversy here. So, I would, if I was going to buy a Jazzmaster made anytime after 65, I would end up having to do some modifications.
Oh, you would.
But I think that without getting into a controversial and sort of critical zone, I think that if one puts, I particularly like the Seymour Duncan Antiquity pickups. I think that they're based on tones coming from vintage Fender Jazzmasters that are accurate. I know that Seymour loves Jazzmasters, so I think that he's really created some good replacement pickups. Tonally, you'd probably have to change the pots. You definitely have to put now they're putting workable bridges. They kind of, Fender, I think, tried to imitate the Mastery bridge thinking that they'd get away with it, but they didn't. But they do have some sort of legal variation now, but I would put a Mastery bridge and a Mastery tremolo on it because Fender hardware, anyway. So, and then, I mean, I have fake Jazzmasters, I have a handful of vintage ones that I've acquired over the years. None of them have the original finish on them, which helps them in the affordability department.
Yeah, for sure. Do you buy guitars in New York?
I'm brutal on these things, so I don't want it to be in perfect shape or be pretty. Sorry, what were you going to ask me?
No, I apologize. I was going to say, is there any place there's nowhere in New York really to buy a guitar that's like affordable, is there? There's not many shops there.
Oh, there's some great shops in New York.
Oh, is there? Where?
I don't know about affordable, but I mean, my two favorites are T.R. Crandall Guitars, now in the Lower East Side, but formerly in the East Village, and Southside Guitars in Williamsburg, and they've been there a long, long time. I'm afraid to go into both of these places. 30th Street Guitars is amazing, but it's not on 30th Street anymore.
It's like I
believe Rivington Guitars is still there. I believe they're on 4th now, not on Rivington.
Yeah.
And, also, Main Drag in Williamsburg is really good. I don't get over there quite enough, but also I'm not trying to shop for guitars anymore. So mostly I go to TR Crandall, which is where I get all my repairs and adjustments done with Tom and Alex over there. And then periodically I'm destroyed by something I see there. And, you know,
I'll have to, I never heard of that shop, so I'm going to make sure I check them out next time in the city. I went to
great
30th Street, you know, the new location. I think it's,
I've never been to the new location, so because it's where I don't go at this point much, and you know what I mean. But it's a lot of good stuff.
Well, it's just the prices were like, you know, they were expensive as hell. Plus the New York price added to it. It was like shit, man.
Well, I mean, it depends. You know, I've definitely gotten affordable things from Southside, and because also I wasn't buying big ticket items. But at this point, why not just go on Reverb.com and make a bid?
Yeah.
You know, that's the way to get vintage gear, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's hard to buy guitars without playing them, and I've made some mistakes with eBay guitars. But then again, I have experts who can resuscitate guitars or modify them to make them work. So I think only once I got something where I just thought, oh God, I'm never going to do this again, you know. And then of course I do it again. I did something without playing it, but generally, I think Reverb's just the way to go. And you can also just look at it and not buy anything and just get a sense of what prices are out there. And it doesn't get that much more if a retailer is putting a guitar on Reverb, depending on where, or more or less depending on where they're located, because they're in a whole international field now.
Yeah.
So I don't think that New York prices, unless they're really going for the big gouge because of tourism or something, I don't think it works that way so much anymore. I think that guitars are just expensive now, or they're not if you're looking for the kind of stuff that I like, which is not, I'm not looking for a, 59 Les Paul.
Yeah. No, neither am I assure you. Trust me.
And, and what electric guitar is worth tons of money at this point? I don't think there's a single electric guitar, unless it was some sort of, hand-carved archtop D'Angelico, that's worth the kind of money that people get now for vintage Tellys and Les Pauls and Strats.
No, it's crazy, man. The vintage, the premier, like you just said, the Les Paul, Strats, and Tellys. It's crazy.
But check this thing out. I just got this sent from. This is a tiny little.
Is that a Harmony?
It's an Air.
Wow!
And it's just it's like half scale. And I got this because Jeff Tweedy has one that I love, and they had it in Chicago at the Chicago Music Exchange. So I put flat wounds on it and had Chicago Fretworks do a neck reset. And this guitar with the amp and case was, I think, $700. So
really,
the neck reset then adds more cost, but now I can actually play it. And this, it's the wood bridge, and
it's what is that? What kind of pickup is that?
Buy it. It's like they have them in Nationals. They have them in all. It's like a Valco thing. But so this, in a way, is like this kind of mini solid body jazz guitar, and I'm going to try to get a lot of use out of it, but wasn't expensive.
No, I'm looking for a Harmony Stratotone, which that looks like.
Those are. I mean, Reverb probably has 30 of them.
Yeah, that's where I need to look. You're right. I'm always afraid to buy on. I've got skunked a couple, not through anybody's fault, but just I bought something like you said. It was like,
yeah, but you have to factor in that you're going to probably need a neck reset, and so just factor that into the cost.
Yeah.
Because those don't have truss rods. I don't think.
No, I don't think they do either. And so my other note, Jason Orm from Alanis. Do you know Jason?
No.
It's funny. He told me to say Jason Orm, Alanis Morissette is really weird. I think he told me to say hello. I don't know, something.
There's a lot of people that I've met and I can't remember their names. So that I feel embarrassed when I'm confronted by this, but I'm not sure who that is. Sorry.
No, it's all. He's Alanis Morissette's guitar player for a long time already. What amp-wise, what are you playing primarily? I'm playing Studious amps made by a young man in Chicago named Bryant Howe, but he's now no longer taking orders and wants to move into high-end stereo. Prior to that, I was playing Tim Schroeder's DB7 that he designed for me, which just ended up being too heavy-duty loud for
Wilco's sound the last couple of years, where we scaled everything down to small amps, which was a beautiful move, in my opinion, on Jeff's part. He's playing through two champs, or a champ and another tiny little amp, and I'm playing through a 20-watt Studious Mosley. And the rest of the time, I don't get to pick my amp. You know, I'm traveling, playing improvised music. It's amp du jour.
Yeah.
So the easiest amp to get on the amp du jour tour is the Fender Deluxe Reverb reissue, which is serviceable and not too much power, and they work until they don't. You know, I mean, they're certainly not handmade, but they're everywhere. And so that is the amp I end up playing quite a bit. On this little run I did down south with Larry Oakes and Gerald Cleaver that I just got back from yesterday, the amp selection was all over the map, and I actually ended up with some phenomenal amplifiers. One of them being the Schroeder DB7 that this guitar player named Killick in Athens, Georgia owns. It's incredibly cool looking. He's completely tricked it out with silkscreen artwork and all this stuff. And then Pat Sansone from Wilco loaned me his Morgan AC40 when we were in Nashville. And both these amps, even given the fact that I'm playing a lot of low octave whammy stuff with this trio, there's no bass player, and I just sometimes go low. There were 40 watts and just too much.
Yeah, it's a lot of power, man. I got that amp right there.
Headroom. So I'll go for headroom over, some sort of classic 15-watt tone. I can't play a Princeton with this music. I need headroom. So it would just be squishing out every time I turned up to a certain level or use my compressor. I like low mids and I like headroom, and I'm trying to defeat treble most of the time.
Sure.
The last Wilco recording, which is for the record that's coming out later this year, I ended up recording almost everything on a little Milkman Princeton Reverb style amp that I bought from them. And I don't know what they call the model or anything, but I replaced the speaker with they like Jupiter speakers, and I replaced it with a 50-watt Alnico, and so I have some headroom. They made a slightly beefier transformer for me, and that thing, of course, I was recording at really low volume, but that thing, tone-wise, was very, very good for Wilco World.
Milkman.
Beautiful, very expensive amps, though. Like, damn.
Was that like what's your favorite amp that you ever played?
That I ever played?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have to say that sort of falls into two categories, because I play with a slightly different set of parameters when I'm playing my own music or improvised music than with Wilco.
Sure.
But I think the amp, not to take away from all of the things I've mentioned in any way, because I really admire Bryant at Studious, and I admire the Milkman amps, and I played a lot of amps in my day. But I think the only time I ever played through an amp where my jaw just dropped open was a Tim Schroeder amp, that just happened to be in the Wilco loft, and I had this beautiful, well, I still have it, this beautiful 4x12 Marshall bottom from their offset reissues that they made only like 300 of. And that was a really, really big sound. But I thought my compressor pedal was still on when I played through that thing. I would just sustain, and he has these vintage caps in there, but maintenance of these amps turned out to be rather an arduous process of just purchasing vintage matched tubes that cost a fortune, and sort of the idea that Tim and his chosen people should be the only ones to repair them. And I'm traveling on the road. Traveling on the road. I needed something a little simpler, I think.
Yeah.
And quieter is what it ended up being. And the Studious amps are incredibly simple, and they're no reverb, no tremolo, none of that stuff. The first one I played was one of his 14-watt Celliers, and it's just tone and volume, and that's my kind of amp right there.
No, I hear you, man.
But that Schroeder sound, man, it's an astonishing sound. I've never heard anything really that can match it in terms of sheer drama.
That's really cool. I've never heard of those. I'm going to look into those.
But I have to say I'm kind of over amps, because I can't always bring them,
Sure.
The other amp that I love so much is my little Magnatone that I recorded most of Sky Blue Sky by Wilco on. And it's incredibly quiet in terms of it doesn't have much oomph, but the tone of that amp and the reverb and of course that beautiful vibrato-y tremolo, that's a wondrous little amp. But once again, do I know the model number? No.
Yeah.
It's a 112. It's maybe 10 watts. It's quiet, but it's a beautiful recording amp. Just the tone of that thing appeals to my general aesthetics, whether it be Wilco or my own music or whatever. I just couldn't ever gig with it because it's not loud enough.
Any unusual or interesting stories behind how you got any of your guitars?
Man, I mean that could go on forever. But I mean, how did I get the Mike Watt guitar? Well, I had played on Ball Hog or Tugboat. I think I'm about 7 tracks or so on that record, and I played my Jaguar. And it turned out he wanted to tour on the record after he did that tour with members of the Foo Fighters on their first tour and Eddie Vedder as his band.
Mm.
It was just Watt and Eddie and Watt's band for the first 2 tours, and then, or maybe the first tour, and then he formed a band with me and Michael Poisner and Vince McGrooney, 2 drummers, and Vince played alto saxophone on one song called "The Crew of the Flying Saucer." And I used to have a concert series at a club in Santa Monica on Monday nights called New Music Monday, and the club was the Alligator Lounge. And Joe Baiza played quite frequently. Joe Baiza from Saccharine Trust, Universal Congress of, and the Mechalodiacs. And the Mechalodiacs played several times at my concert series. And one time, instead of his Sunburst Strat, Joe was playing this black Jazzmaster. And I was already scheming to try to get a Jazzmaster because I wanted something a little more rock, something a little beefier, because I was going to go out with Mike Watt on tour. And I said, Joe, what the hell, man? Where did you get this Jazzmaster? He said, oh, it's Watt's. He loaned it to me because my Strat's being refretted. So I said, Watt, can I borrow this guitar for this tour? And he said, man, I don't need this guitar. I'll just sell it to you at the end of the tour. With the money you make, you can just buy it from me. I'll sell it to you for what I paid for it. He had bought it at Guitar Maniacs in Tacoma, Washington for $800.
Wow.
Thinking at the time, wow, $800 is so expensive. And he thought it was a 59. It turns out it's an early 1960. But that's how I got that guitar, and that's why it's called the Watt. And his name is etched into the back of the heel of the, or engraved, I should say, in the heel of the back of the neck, and also the tremolo assembly, which now I've had to replace.
Very cool.
Street tremolo. So I've saved that. Of course, it says Watt. He engraves it into everything he owns, I think, and that's why that guitar is called the Watt. My other story I'll give you, and then I'll have to stop with stories, I suppose, is pretty awesome too, and it involves another Jazzmaster. And it's a Jazzmaster that I am now kind of saving in the Wilco loft because it sounds as good as the Watt. There's something about the Watt and the pots in that thing.
I like how you call it the Watt, by the way. There's something about the Watt, like it's living. That's pretty cool.
A lot of people think I call it Watt, but no, it's Watt. Watt is Watt. He's a person, but this is a guitar. So anyway, my friend John Woodland, a.k.a. Woody of Mastery Bridge fame, who knows more about guitars than pretty much anyone I've ever met, and loves Jazzmasters, was working with the Roy Rogers estate on the sale and authentication and documentation of his legendary Martin OM1, which is #1, I think, and he bought in a pawn shop and supposed to be one of the greatest acoustic guitars in the history of Martin, if not acoustic guitars. And it was going up for auction at Christie's here in New York. And so Woody was working with them and said, there's a Jazzmaster here that's going to go up for auction that Roy Rogers played at the Seattle World's Fair in 1962. It was repainted to match his suit. The color, I usually call it raspberry smoothie. And it has, white house paint where the dots on the side of the neck are, so I guess so he could see it better. The toggle switch was removed and a Fender amplifier dome light was put in that hole. So I learned then that the diameter is the same, apparently.
Yeah, that's weird.
Toggle switches in for a Fender amp dome light. But anyway, I thought, oh man, okay. And Woody said, oh, it's a 1961. It's my favorite year for Jazzmasters. The pickup sounded especially good that year, whatever. So I said, okay, I don't know how to bid on these things. I told my friend David Breskin, who knows a lot about such things and who has quite an amazing collection of art and photography, about this. And he said, let me bid on it for you. So long story short, he bid on the guitar. There was, other than the house, there was only one other bidder. The bidding ended after 3 bids. And I got the guitar minus the Christie's juice that they add to it, so-called. Yeah. For, as I recall, let's see, I got it for $1,300.
Wow, that's pretty intense. That's really good, man.
Right. So without playing it or seeing it, of course, but on Woody's recommendation. So, and this was before I was living in New York. I just went, I had a crash pad I was sharing in Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn with Bill Frisell. We were paying rent on it in the building where a lot of our musician friends lived. And that way we'd have a place to stay when we're in New York. And Bill was certainly here a lot and always, now he lives here again. But
yeah.
So I went over to Christie's on a little visit to New York and flunked down my credit card and picked up this guitar. It was just so weird just to walk into Christie's and say, I'm getting something here, Is
it like nobility in there? Does it reek of...
No, it's just, I don't know. There's all kinds of things that look like antiquities everywhere. I don't know. It's just a different vibe than I've ever experienced. I walked out of there with the mystery guitar, plugged it in eventually, because I didn't have access to an amp for a while. And lo and behold, the thing sounds phenomenal. So it's just the other best sounding Jazzmaster I own. I took it out on a Wilco tour just to kind of break it in a little bit. I had to, put the toggle switch back on. Woody actually took care of the whole thing, got a mastery bridge on it, so it's playable. And the first night I brought it out, somebody threw an entire wad of multicolored Sharpies at me and hit the guitar.
What is up with that?
I don't know. It's nothing like that ever happened before or since. But anyway, and I was really angry, and I said, okay, well, I'm the only person allowed to mess up this guitar. So this guitar is going to stay in Chicago until I need it, really need it. And I've recorded with it in Chicago, but I don't take it out anymore because I have plenty of other guitars.
That's a really random object to throw at somebody in the first place.
But it was every color in the Sharpie universe.
Like, who throws what? I mean, you're like the most laid back dude. Like, why would anybody bug you in the first place? Is really weird. Like, that's.
I don't know. It's not like the days when I was out with Mike Watt opening for Primus, and and we had quarters thrown at us, and then sometimes entire extra large bottles of mineral water.
Nice.
Wet T-shirts, like disgusting stuff flying at you right and left. It wasn't like that. This was just so random.
Where was this? That was in the city?
No, God, I don't remember where it was. It's wherever we were starting our tour. That
is really weird. Like, I've never been to any concert and said, man, I need to throw something at these guys. Like, that's even a bad act. Like, that's like just
people throw mostly back then. They would throw CDRs of their music, thinking they were going to actually get an opening slot for whatever, or they'd throw things they wanted signed or gifts. or they throw a cap or something, you know what I mean? But not a whole lot of stuff, not compared to opening for Primus. And my favorite Primus object thrown at me was a bottle of dirt, like a little plastic bottle that's filled with dirt. We were playing outside, and the thing went sailing across right in front of me. And I used to sing a Madonna song called My Secret Garden with this band, and I would not play guitar until the end, where there was a guitar solo jam kind of moment. And I just, at that gig in Mesa, Arizona, just dumped the dirt all over myself and rubbed myself in a sort of, I guess you could say, rather fey, neo-Morrissey kind of way, just to anger the crowd even more.
So a bottle of dirt.
That was a lot of fun.
Imagine the prep for that. Hey, hang on, I forgot my bottle of dirt. I'll be ready in a second.
I think the most terrifying object still was the full Crystal Geyser, full tall bottle of water that missed my head by about 5 inches.
Wow. Yeah, that's scary. The dangers of being a rock star, man.
Hey, at least I didn't have to tour when people were spitting on you, I mean, right? 70s, the gobbing, and the punk scene.
Yeah.
No thanks.
That's good about you, Nels. You find the silver lining. I like that. Hey, Desert Island Discs, no particular order, top 3.
Oh,
just for this minute. Knee jerk.
I forgot you were going to ask me about this.
Knee jerk reaction, just for this minute.
Knee jerk reaction. This could go on for a while, and then I'll regret that I didn't think of 10,000 more titles. I mean, I'd have to obviously put the first 3 Jimi Hendrix Experience albums in the top 3, I suppose. The first Allman Brothers album.
Yeah, it's a great record, man.
The first 3 Allman Brothers albums. Allman Brothers Band, Idlewild South, live at Fillmore, and Sonic Youth, Daydream Nation, and Bad Moon Rising, and Evol, and the cassette that Thurston released called Sonic Death. It's very important to me. John Coltrane, The Love Supreme, Sunship, Africa Brass, Stellar Regions, Pharoah Sanders, Elevation, Jim Hall, These Rooms, Jim Hall Trio Live, Jim Hall Trio Live in Japan.
Nels, you've been so compliant answering the questions. So now I just said 3, and you've given me about 40. It's your first deviant. You're.
Well, I can't. I'm just not succinct, but also I just trying to be fair. Fred Frith guitar solos was very important. Derek Bailey ballads. Booker Little out front. Bill Evans Trio Explorations. Ralph Towner Diary, Blue Sun, Solstice, and Timelines. Andrew Hill Timelines. There's a lot of timelines out there. I even had a song in the 80s called Timeline. Anyway, that's as far as I'll go now. Oh, I have to mention all the Low albums. Well, I'd say Low, Trust, and The Curtain Hits the Cast. Now, I haven't even gotten into Django Reinhardt or Wes Montgomery or any of that. And those are just guitar records. I mean, I don't know. I'm at a loss. I could turn around here and look at my record collection.
No, don't do that, man. You'll be out of control, Nels.
Oh, shit. I forgot to mention the, double nickels on the dime by the Minutemen. Shit. Okay.
Well, thank you for that. What most important? No, let me ask you this one, man. Best decision you ever made?
Huh.
It's funny that if you said worst decision, it doesn't that one always come right away? But best decision is not as easy, is it?
Well, I mean, the first thing that came to mind was getting the courage to ask my wife Yuka if she would ever consider getting married again.
Dude, that's nice, man.
Okay.
That's very cool. You need to play this for her now, man. She'll be very seriously, man. That's a very cool thing.
She's very cool.
It's interesting, and I've said this a number of times. In this business, the devotion and admiration and respect that people have for their partners is off the charts, as opposed to like in the business world. It's completely different.
Anybody who'd want to be with a so-called artist is a different kind of individual. And then when artists marry each other, then there's a deeper understanding of how inconsistent, aberrant, or difficult or arduous life can be with that person. And so, yeah, maybe that's what it is. You really got to be tolerant and understanding, especially if like your husband or wife's not going to be home half the time.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
I never had kids, so there's a whole layer of pressure and planning that I never had to deal with, because I still live kind of in my own mind in a rather adolescent manner.
That's another very common thing I hear. But that's why you have all your hair, man. I got to say, Nels has great, you have great freaking hair, man, honestly.
Nothing to do with anything but DNA, my friend.
Well, that's awesome. You have awesome hair, I'll tell you, man.
My twin brother's got plenty as well, you know, and we're both kind of graying around the same rate. And he raised, and his wife raised a daughter, and, you know, there were some serious challenges there, and everything's very cool now. But man, I figured his hair was going to go way ahead of mine.
Dude, this is what happens with 3 kids. You're looking at it right now.
Oh, geez.
Another tough question, man. What do you like most about yourself?
I think that what I like most about myself is that I didn't end up having a contentious, spiteful relationship with my parents, that they were generally very supportive and gave me a good grounding in, I guess, what I'd call a moral compass.
Yeah,
in nice. A non-religious sense. And that I try to be, in spite of my own tendency to juvenile or petulant thought, you know, I'm a little oversensitive at times, and I really need to relax. But I'm pretty fair-minded as a result of my upbringing, so I think being tolerant and compassionate in today's climate is maybe a plus, and maybe I possess some of those traits.
Thank you, man. Thanks for sharing. That was really nice. How about the flip side? If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
Oh, I can be thin-skinned and oversensitive, insecure, you know, especially in a relationship. So that would be nice to dial that back. I'm working on it, though.
Aren't we all? Happiest moment or time in your life?
Oh God, I forgot you were going to ask me that. Well, I mean, I have a lot of happy moments, you know. I mean, I have to say, certainly, like Yuka and I got married twice. We got married in Japan, and we got married here in New York City in the club called Le Poisson Rouge. And the weddings couldn't have been more different from each other, but both of them were incredibly beautiful experiences. So those are way, way up there. Those are very, very happy times. I also had a very happy time the first time I toured with the Geraldine Fibbers in 1996 as a substitute guitar player. And my 1996 self was in heaven because I was a fan of this music, and I ended up just loving the people in the band so much, and I was really dying to get out of being in Los Angeles in my day-to-day life there and the job that I had. I needed to get away from a lot of this sort of stale, entrenched energy that was dogging me. And not to say that my life there was bad, it was just that I was getting kind of desperate, I suppose. So getting in that van with them and touring the 10 weeks or so that I did with them in 96 is way, way up there in my happiness meter.
That's wonderful, man. It's a really cool thing that you get to do that, man.
Well,
really
it wasn't just because of the music and the people too. I was getting some aspect of myself realized that had been, I think, just stifled in some way. Not by others, but maybe just by the fact my life hadn't revealed something to me yet, you know. And then some things were revealed at that point, and the people in the band were so lovely to me, and I just really I remember this feeling of absolute joy that I had internally and never wanting those tours to end.
That was a really elegant way you just put that. You said, I was being stifled by something my life hadn't revealed to me yet. I think that's I need to remember that, because sometimes you are questioning something and, you can't push time, and life doesn't always work. Many times things don't work on your time frame. And I like the way you said that, and life hadn't revealed it to me yet. That's a good thing for me to remember.
Well, it's a good thing for me to remember too, but I'm definitely not the same person I was in 1996. That would be scary.
That would be scary.
What that experience offered me was something I needed even more than I thought I did. So it's just, when something like that comes along, and you experience great happiness, but also a certain amount of self realization.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome. And there's so many great experiences I've had, particularly in this endeavor of music making, that I could go on and on and on, but those really stand out.
Favorite New York City food?
It has to be New York centric.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess if I'm going to be New York centric, I'm going to have to go with a decent slice of pizza. But I didn't grow up with the same zest for the perfect slice as many of my East Coast comrades. So I think I'm pretty easily satisfied.
Yeah, man, you got to have good pizza when you grow up in New York City.
I like a white slice. And
really?
There's some, I'll go ricotta, white slice with garlic, and either just that, and I'll put some red chili flakes on it, or spinach. I have the white slice with spinach. Used to be a killer one at Ray's on Prince Street.
Sure.
And I haven't been there in a long time. I think they only have the little counter. They don't have their restaurant anymore. But God, I had a really delicious one recently, and I can't remember where that was. But I don't eat a lot of pizza, but that's very New York, having pizza. At this point now, as far as eating daily goes, and if we're not having food made here at home, we tend to favor Korean food and Middle Eastern food.
Yeah, I like Middle Eastern
periodic
food.
Forays into the ever-improving world of Mexican food.
Yeah, there's some huge...
Forever.
Yeah, there's some big...
Being from Southern California, It used to be very difficult to come to New York and get... I get a desperate need for a decent burrito, and you just couldn't get it. So lots of stuff going on now. And once again, I'm not obsessed with it being the best or anything. It just has to be, give me that warm, fuzzy feeling of familiarity, the comfort thing. Because I grew up eating American Mexican food, the gloopy refried beans and enchiladas and all that cheese all over everything and whatnot that a lot of people now disparage. But I'm more than happy to eat a nice, mediocre plate of chili relleno, rice and beans any day of the week. It doesn't have to be absolutely top notch for me to get that nice warm feeling, Man, and also, beautiful thing about joining Wilco, besides everything, Chicago Mexican food kicks major ass.
Oh, really?
Very good place for Mexican food.
There was a new place I just went to, and we were there. I think it was on maybe Elizabeth Street or something, and it was like a food truck inside of a...
Oh, yes, I've been there. What is the name of that place? That place is really good.
Great food, and it was priced reasonably. I couldn't believe it.
That's a great place. That's
a
great place. I'm blanking on the name. I've only eaten there a couple of times. But there was another Mexican restaurant on Elizabeth Street that's gone now, and I'm going to blank on the name of it, and it doesn't matter because it's gone. But it was just one of those New York experiences where Yuka and I used to eat there quite often. And one day, no warning, no announcement, nothing. Just think, wait, what's going on? Did they have a family emergency? No, out of business.
Yeah.
And they a long time. Anyway, that's New York for you.
Any hobbies or interests outside of music, Nels?
Well, I'm I'm always a little bit sheepish to mention that not really, but
No, that's totally cool.
I think like a lot of people who play music, I'm really interested in food, and not in a super foodie way, but my wife's obsessed with food, not necessarily in a foodie way either, but in a more of a how it's fascinating and nurturing, and how quality ingredients are really enough, so it's not super fussy and elaborate. But ever since I was a teenager, I wanted to cook, and took a cooking class in school and did all this kind of stuff. And I can't claim that I do a whole lot of cooking at this point in my life, but I love it. I love any attempt to make anything, and I'll settle for just my own personal spin on guacamole. So if you're in New York, man, I'm going to make some for you.
I would love it. I love guacamole, man.
But I just cook for myself, and my wife cooks up a lot of great stuff. And other than that, I'm kind of like a lot of people, really interested in movies and visual art, so-called, the art world. Not so up on the art world as I used to be. And I don't have a lifestyle that could sustain having a lot of artwork. So I just still enjoy that people are out there creating and challenging our perceptions, and coming up with sometimes really staggeringly original ways to express themselves. So I follow that somewhat. I used to be a fashion voyeur, pretty obsessively, not a participant, but a voyeur, and used to imagine how marvelous it would be to just like try on these crazy clothes and whatever. But now I just don't care. I still look, if it comes up in my news feed,
sure,
something that looks fascinating. My wife and I love this Danish designer named Henrik Bibsko, who's also a musician, and this stuff's not like $4,000 for a scarf or anything. So, and I love socks, so I have 1 million pairs of socks because I like wacky socks. And by wacky, I don't mean necessarily humorous, like
with cats on them or something.
Yeah, but like Bill Frisell and Jeff Tweedy are sock people, but they also enjoy a goofy sock, and I don't have a lot of goofy pairs of socks. I like original designs, bold ideas, and it's some of the only areas that men get to have any fun. Fashion-wise, besides if you have to wear a necktie, you could probably pick something a little bit, bold. Like all the heavies in all the old 40s movies always have the best neckties. Like, check it out sometime.
Yeah.
Like, mostly, of course, they're shorty ties back then.
Yep.
Man, oh man, incredible designs. Like so phenomenal and fascinating to me. So, I just kind of used to pay attention more to that and be really obsessive about the beauty of some of these girls who are not conventionally beautiful. And I used to really identify with this kind of other idea of beauty. And I'm not talking about like Claudia Schiffer, or Cindy Crawford. It was more like the Kristen McManamy, like awkward, androgynous, whatever. So this used to really be riveting to me. And I'm 63. Geez.
That's all right. You still got your mojo, man. That's all good.
Kristen, though, she's awesome. She's still modeling.
Cooking, number one hobby for musicians.
Yeah.
Yeah, number one by far.
Yep.
2 more questions, man, and I've really enjoyed this, and I cannot thank you enough for being so freaking cool.
Not downhill skiing? What?
No, it's not downhill skiing. Anything you wish you did differently?
Well, I mean, we've gone over a few regrets, and we've gone over a few things about, oneself that one wishes had gone differently. That question doesn't really resonate with me too much because I feel like I'll get mired in a thought process that's filled with ideas about regret or something.
Then don't answer it, man. That's totally cool. That's
what we've done differently.
No, man, don't answer it because you're struggling for it. It was like, don't.
I mean, I know there are some things, 1 or 2. I did do a record, called Coward. And the reason it's called Coward, I won't elaborate on, but if you want to ponder that for a while, it wasn't supposed to be amusing. It was just supposed to be reflective of all the maybe more bold, iconoclastic, brave decisions that I could have made in life and didn't. I maybe took the softer, mealy mouth approach to some of these things, artistically and personally. So, but without enumerating them, there is that. But I don't really live in that world of regret so much anymore.
Good.
You know, I certainly was mired in it for a few decades there.
You know, I had a bad spell about 10 years ago, and a buddy of mine told me something during time, really close friend. He said, Craig, he goes, stop. Don't look in the rear view mirror. You're never going to serve yourself by doing that. And so, I mean, I was ready to hear that, or just maybe the way he said it or the second he said it. And I really appreciated that. And something about hearing that sort of snapped me out of a little bit.
I think if you can do that and not get trapped, then you can use that, whatever that information in the rearview mirror is, to help you make decisions right now and moving forward. You know, my biggest musical regret, music related regret, is that I used to play with a man named Eric Von Essen. He died in 1997. He was a musical genius and also sort of my musical partner, on and off, but mostly on for about 17 years. We started in the late 70s and made music. Well, what we were doing, making music less in the early 90s, but he ended up being like a first call jazz bass player in Los Angeles and was an amazing composer and multi-instrumentalist. And I learned more about playing guitar from him than from anybody. And because he could play guitar, piano, chromatic harmonica, bass, and tabla. And Eric and I had a duo that started in, I think, maybe 77. And we made a record called Elegies in 1980. And first record, I guess, sort of mine, quote unquote, it was ours, acoustic music. And we ended up furthering this duo to the point where we had an insane amount of original repertoire, and we were playing every Sunday in a sort of a fern bar club in Santa Monica at the dinner hour at 7:00 for weeks and weeks and weeks, generally being ignored by whoever was in there. And at this point, I was playing my various acoustic guitars and bass recorder, and he was playing piano and bass, and we even had a guitar duet, and we never recorded in this period. And that's my regret, because we thought, well, we didn't have any money. We didn't know if anyone cared. We should have at least had somebody come in and record us maybe 3 different times in this fern bar restaurant. And we didn't. And I don't know why we didn't think it was worth it to document this. And I guess when you're younger, and at this point I would have been in my late 20s, or maybe even younger, maybe I was in my mid 20s. You don't think you think some things are just going to go on forever. And then Eric later, who had always had struggled with drugs and alcohol, Eric ended up in a phase of his life where he was living in his car, and I was on tour with the Geraldine Fibbers, and he asked to come by and get my music folder because he was doing some teaching, and he picked it up from my then wife, and I never saw that music again, even though he ended up teaching in Sweden, where he passed away. And I had students who put all his music into Sibelius that they could find. None of that music ever emerged. So we didn't record it, and all the written music is lost.
Wow.
So that's probably the thing that pains me the most about the fairly distant past.
Sure.
Of my musical life. And I wish that I'd had the wherewithal to just say, screw it, let's borrow money and record something, just because we're at the top of our game right now and we have so much material, let's just record everything. And so moving forward now, I do have the attitude that if I have an idea, I should probably record it rather than not record it if I can, just because of that experience that I had.
Good for you, man. I'm glad you do that now. Last question. Biggest change in your personality, Nels, over the last 10 years, and how much of that has been intentional and how much is just a natural part of aging?
I don't think I've changed much in the last 10 years other than to get a little, get happier because I got married 9 years ago. So the anxiety and sadness that I was feeling being separated from my partner prior to meeting my wife, I hated, and I had this kind of feeling that, oh, now I'm an adult. So that's what this is. I hate it. It was this feeling of being kind of dead inside, and potentially, let's say, unmoved by things that would normally have been moving to me. You know?
Wow. Yeah.
So that's the biggest change. And yes, every relationship has its challenges, and I'm not saying that it's all like just smiles and whatever.
Oh man, that's of course. Yeah, that's not anybody who says that is just lying.
but it's growth, and it's also the foundation of it is so strong. So that would be it.
That's wonderful, man. Listen, I want to tell people some of the stuff you got going on, but first I just want to thank you very much. Genuinely, you're a really sweet guy. I really thank you very much. You're an incredibly
embarrassing.
Now I know I'm too bad. You're an incredibly talented human being, as a musician, as a player, and just a really genuine person. And I really want to thank you for that, because it felt great listening to all this, how sincere you are. So thank you. That was a real privilege. That's the privilege of what I do here, and thank you. You've made my weekend here, so thanks very much.
Well, yeah, have a great weekend. Okay, what I'm going to enumerate here?
Yeah, all right. So you're touring through the East Coast through May, right?
I don't have that much. What am I doing in May? I've got a couple gigs this month with Yuka and our Cup duo. We're opening for Deerhoof here in New York on the 28th. The 26th, we're in Philadelphia. I've got a gig with Stephen Bernstein and Sex Mob doing tribute to Roswell Rudd coming up, and the Town Hall Ensemble in early May doing it with Bob Amal. Very exciting. I don't know what I'm going to do, since there's already going to be really cool guitar playing happening with Bob Amal. But dude,
just be Nels Cline. That's all you got to do, man. That's why people want you to play.
And gigging and recording with Satoko Fuji Big Band at the beginning of May, recording the Nels Cline Singers Unlimited at the beginning of May for God knows who, but at least for recording. That'll be with Scott Amendola, Trevor Dunn, Ciro Baptista, Brian Marcella, and Skerrick and me. And then what else am I doing? Recording with Julian Lage, some duo stuff, and see where that goes.
Have you played with Chris at Eldridge? Because he plays a lot with Julian.
No, I haven't, but I've heard Julian and Chris's duo, which is remarkable.
He's a really nice guy, man. You'd get along.
He's wonderful.
Chris
absolutely wonderful. And I think they're still trying to further their duo, but it's they're both so busy and successful, but yeah, I hope they're still doing their duo. And I don't remember what goes on in later May. I'm hoping not so much, so I can actually. I mean, I know you and I have a little of this and that to get our new record out.
Spinning Creative. I had something to note here. Spinning Creature.
Yeah, so we're looking at maybe fall release for that. We've been working on the mastering and sequencing, and I think that's now done. And my mind's going blank.
Wilco touring Europe in June.
In Wilco, yeah, I was going to say when we go to Europe and we do Solid Sound, and I'll be playing with Yuka and Cup at Solid Sound, and Julian and I are going to do some improvised duets along with film. July and August are just kind of sort of this and that, I'm trying to. I may have blown it, but I'm trying to be home as much as possible in July and August, because September, October, November, December, January is looking pretty solidly Wilco'd.
Any chance you'll be down here?
Florida?
Yeah, Tampa.
I'm just there.
I know, but with Wilco.
Tampa. No, I would imagine it's possible in the fall, but I don't know what our schedule is.
Awesome.
I would, if I were to use my experience of past tours, I would think maybe next year for Florida, because it's a hard place to tour.
It is
about that.
Very hard place.
Back the way you came, kind of,
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, totally.
Jeff was just down there, right?
Yeah, he was. That's right. I saw that. Well, I will look out for you, and if you come down here, we'll have some guacamole and a margarita.
I'm down.
Hey, man, thank you very much for everything. And maybe you come back on and we can promote Spinning Creature when it comes out. Love to do that and support you guys.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for everything. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it on your social media channels. We appreciate your support. Thanks very much to Nels Cline for spending time with us. I truly appreciate it. I want everybody to check out Nels and support his music and Wilco and everything he's got going on with himself and Yuka. And let him know that you're a fan and that you heard this. Make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com, sign up to get on our newsletter list so you and I can connect. And most importantly, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun, right? Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.